and you can get easier entrapped or entangled with them. So from the streamlining perspective, we do not really like them. Hello and welcome. My name is Dorota, and I would like to welcome you in next episode of our Versus Monday series. I hope that everybody had a nice weekend. Maybe you did some diving, and if not, I hope that this diving video will bring you on a proper diving mood towards your week. So thank you very much for tuning in again. And today's topic will be a topic of wings again. I did have already a video comparing two types of wings, so a horse shoe-shaped wing and an oval wing, which is not the topic today, of course, but I will be talking today about bungee wings and why do we divers that are not using those, and what, from our perspective, are the disadvantages of those wings. So what I am really talking here today about really is a wing that is bigger in size most of the time, and the size is compressed when it's not needed by sets of bungees, so elastic ropes, let's say, or bungees, to be a little bit more streamlined and a little bit more snug. So this would be the so-called bungeed wings, and I will compare them to a non-bungeed wing, so a wing that Jewy diver would use, or some other divers who would choose not to use bungees, where are much more open, so they do not have any additional items that would restrict the wing in any way. So this would be the main character of today. So the bungeed wings compared to a non-bungeed ones. Let's start with first of the areas that I would like to discuss, which is streamlining. You might already notice that when I'm talking about GUI configuration, we talk a lot about streamlining because we would like to be streamlined to be able to move more efficiently underwater and potentially to decrease the risk of getting caught or getting entrapped or entangled with our own equipment and the environment. So you see that streamlining is quite an issue for us as GUI divers. So if you are looking at non-bungeed wings, they will come in different sizes. And depending on what type of tank you are using, either it's a single tank or a double tank, or if they are different sizes of doubles, you would need to change wings because they will have different volumes. They will have different profiles because they are not being restricted or compressed by anything. So this is an advantage, of course, because they are simpler, and I will refer to that a little bit later as well. But this you might find as a disadvantage as well, because you might think, okay, now I would need to have more wings to switch between, depending on what set of tanks I am using. And if you compare it to a bungeed wing, it might seem a little bit more attractive because you might have a wing that is much bigger in volume, and sometimes they come in really huge volumes like 60 lbs or even over 90 lbs. It's a huge wing, but then this size is compressed because it's squeezed by those bungees holding it together. So what you might think is that the benefit of those will be that I might have like a dual or a triple use wing because I will use only one. Either I'm diving with a single tank or with a double 12 liter or double 18 or double 20, because I will just compress the excess of the size to a smaller one using those bungees. But to be honest, those bungees, they, in a perspective of streamlining, might cause problems. They cause some other problems, which I will refer later on. But in case of streamlining, those bungees may create issues because if they break, or if one of them breaks, or piece of this breaks, it will create a wing that it's not really symmetrical anymore, because, you know, when the bungee pops off, the wing will kind of unfold a little bit on that side, which will create a very awkward shape, and it will for sure increase the effort that you would need to put in moving with this wing underwater, because the streamlining will not be there, and it will create much more drag. The other thing that these wings create, because of those bungees being on the side, if you would be using those wings in narrower spaces, or if you will be swimming very close to objects, in a wreck, in a cave, or very close to the reef, or through an overhang, those bungees might catch things because they will act as, you know, like a net that might catch on things, and you can get easier entrapped or entangled with them. So from the streamlining perspective, we do not really like them because the risk of this bungee failing and this wing unfolding suddenly might create a risk of being less streamlined, and then it will create the risk, the bungees itself might create a risk of getting trapped on, because you can just hook yourself with those bungees onto something. So this was a discussion about streamlining. The next that I would like to talk about, which relates a little bit to the same, is stability. Now we will be talking about stability underwater, and by stability I mean the movement of diver from side to side, so we could call it a balance as well. So if we are talking about non-bungeed wings, the wings itself will kind of cradle the tanks in between them, and because the wings do have much less restriction for the gas to flow around them or flow through them depending on the shape of the wing that you have, it will allow you for quite nice stability because the gas moves quicker and much freer. And of course you might say, oh, you know, if the gas moves quicker, it might create more instability if you are moving quickly. But in the longer run, if you control it, it really creates super stable wing, because you can have an equal amount of gas in one or the other side of the wing. And as well, the ease of transfer of the gas will allow you for a very, very fine-tuning, very good fine-tuning of your position. Now, if you look at the bungeed wing, if you think about those pockets of gas that those bungees will create on the sides, it is much harder for the gas to move around. So you might end up having more gas on one side than on the other side, and it will be much harder, and it will take much more time for that gas to kind of find the way through all of these creases and crevices and folds that those bungees are creating to move to the other side. And the other thing is that when I mentioned before, if one of these bungee breaks, or if the bungee breaks, the wing kind of unfolds, you know, in a very unpredictable way, because maybe only one of those bungees will break, or the wing will just be folded not really very precisely, and then you will entrap gas on one side, which will be very hard to remove, and then you will need to put a little bit more work to get your stability. So from that perspective, it's not really very user-friendly to get a very nice and easy to achieve stability. What we discussed now was stability, and I was talking that a bungeed wing have a potential of trapping gas in it because of the bungees contracting the wing together and creating folds where the gas really can get trapped. So now I would like to talk about a next topic, which for us Dewey divers is really very important, is weighting, or even overweighting. So where the overweighting is a state where the diver carries more weight than it's actually needed, which comes with a variety of different problems, which I will not cover everything here because it will be a different topic for a different video. But let's talk about weighting and how does it work with both types of wings. So first of all, if you have a wing that is non-bungeed, so the gas can escape the wing much more quicker and in much more efficient way, because there is nothing restricting the flow of gas. It just flows around and goes through the inflator or a dump valve here in the back. So in that case, the diver will tend to have less amount of weight compared to a bungeed wing, because what happens with a bungeed wing, and to be honest, I have seen it with my own eyes on one of my students, that I will tell the story in a second. The bungeed wings, because of the bungees and because of how many crevices and folds the wing will create, the gas will get trapped. And it will be very hard to release really everything from that wing, because some gas always will remain in some of these folds. And as a comparison, I can give you an example of one of my former students or customers when I was working in a dive center in Egypt, where he tried to dive a wing on one of his holidays, and he was using a non-bungeed wing. But then when he go back to his own country and then he was discussing with sub shop owners, he was advised to buy a bungeed wing. For whatever reasons that the shop was recommending this one. Then he came back and we tried to dive, and I was working in the Red Sea, where the sea is quite salty, so you need a little bit more weight compared to a freshwater. And the guy was diving in a 7mm wetsuit, and I was trying to bring him down, and I just couldn't, because I was putting weight on, and I ended up with 16 kilos, and I said, like, wow, it's a lot. I mean, it's really a lot. I mean, it's almost impossible that he needs that much weight. And I said, okay, there is something wrong with it. We did the dive, he ended up with having a little bit more than 16 kilos of weight, which is really a lot. And then I said, you know, let's experiment with something else. Let's change the wing. And then I just put him on a non-bungee wing with the same amount of weight. And then he didn't even release all of the gas from the wing when he started to sink, almost like a stone. And I said, like, whoa, whoa, hang a minute. So, you know, I brought him back to the surface and we started to remove the weight and we ended up having 8. So it's a huge difference because he was carrying twice the amount of the weight that he actually needed, because the wing, the bungee wing, trapped so much gas inside and he was unable to release it because the gas was just trapped. And now you might say, but you know, what's the problem with having additional gas in the wing? Because if I can go down and the gas doesn't really bother me, so what's the problem with this? And of course I will come back here to streamlining, because how efficient you can move through the water, because if you have more weight, you need to move the weight around with you. So you need to climb with this additional weight on a boat, you need to smooth that weight to kind of propel yourself underwater, so it's heavier. So it's more effort, you will use more gas, you will be more exhausted, potentially you will accumulate more CO2 and all of the other things that come with overweighting. And then it's not the main problem even now, because the next thing that I would like to discuss more in detail is how those wings behave when they fail, and what the risk is here between the non-bungee wing and a bungee wing in the context of potentially being overweighted when you are using a bungee wing. Let's discuss now the final thing that I would like to talk about is wing failure and how those two types of wings, so bungee and non-bungee wings, will behave in such situations. So what I'm meaning by a wing failure, because there might be many and I will discuss like this in 2 separate parts. So first we would have any failures that are related to the situation where the wing cannot hold gas anymore because it's have a hole, maybe it's ruptured, which is very, very rare, but it can have a hole or a puncture. Maybe you have lost one of the OPVs, so overpressure valves, so this one got unscrewed and it's lost. The other thing that can happen, which is very dangerous and very often people do not think about it, is then when this connection between your corrugated hose, so the hose that allows the gas to flow in, pops off from your shoulder, and then you have no way on inflating that wing. And because it is on your shoulder, the gas will not be held in the wing when you're on the surface. If you would be in an upright position, like I'm standing now, the wing will just lose gas from here. So this is the most dangerous situation that you might have, that this pops off. So now we are talking about failures where the wing cannot hold gas anymore. So if you are talking about, or if we are considering now a non-bungee wing, and a person who is properly weighted, because this is extremely important now in that scenario. So as we discussed before, a non-bungee wing would most of the time require less weight. So the divers will have a better chance of being properly weighting, so carrying the amount of weight that they actually need. And very often with this is connected the amount of gas that you have in the wing, because if you are properly weighted, there will not be a lot of gas, regardless of the equipment that you are using. And here I'm referring to something that Joe is calling a balance trick, which is as well a different discussion for a different video. But then the main idea is that this system will not be overweighted, very generally speaking. So now if you are talking about a diver that is properly weighted, it means that it has a very little amount of gas in the wing, and the wing has a hole, so it cannot hold the gas. If the diver positions himself in a position where the hole is on the bottom, so the gas is trapped or is held by the other still intact part of the wing, the diver can finish the dive quite safely. So he can continue with the ascent, he can just stay on the surface, and there, knowing that he has a puncture, knowing or recognizing where the air is escaping from, he can position his body in a way that the wing will still hold the small amount of gas that he needs to be neutrally buoyant and potentially to come up on the surface. And we can add to that, of course, a team awareness and a teamwork, diving in a team where the team can assist diver having such a problem and then bring him up safely to the surface and support him. So this would be a scenario when we have a diver with a non-bungee wing and properly weighted. Now if you go to the second type of wing, which, as I said, very often creates a situation that diver is overweighted. and he has more gas in the wing that he actually needs. So the wing is more full. So now in this case, if this wing will have a hole, it will be much harder for the diver to transfer the gas to the area where it could be protected, because it's so big, or the amount of gas is so big, that will be just escaping because the wing is potentially more full. Additionally to this, the bungees that are on the wing, it can squeeze the remaining of the gas out. So if you combine being overweighted and having the bungees, might create a situation that this wing will be really very hard to control in a situation where the wing has a hole, so it's not intact and it doesn't have the ability to hold the gas anymore. So from our perspective as GUI divers, that's why we do not want to have those wings, because first of all they can very often create overweighting, and then in a situation that the wing cannot hold gas, it will create more problems because the bungees will be squeezing out the gas even more in a situation that I'm already not being able to keep the gas in my wing. Continuing with the same discussion, very often what you will as well experience or see or hear as an argument for bungee wings or for this type of configuration, that it might be more beneficial to have a second wing or a dual bladder. And by dual bladder, I mean two bladders inside one outer cover, that in case one of them is broken, I can use the other one. So I will have two inflators, potentially two wings together, or I will have one outer bladder with double bladders inside, so I will have kind of a redundancy there. But now the problem is in the detail, and it's a little bit of not the proper solution to the problem, because the problem is overweighting and it's not the failure of the wing, which is relatively rare as well. And as well, in the case of another wing emergency, which I didn't cover yet, which is a self-inflating wing, so inflator is stuck and it's giving a continuous flow of gas to my wing, so I have a huge risk of just, being blown up to the surface. If I have two inflators, I will have 50% chance of handling the proper wing which is broken, because I would not know which one at that moment is inflating, and if I have the self-inflating wing, I need to react relatively quickly if it's really full power on. So then this solution really doesn't solve the problem. From my perspective, it increases the danger, because then I might actually end up floating up and thinking on the way up, okay, which one should I disconnect? And you might say, it's 50-50 chance, but I would not like to have it. I would like to have 100% security that if I disconnect, I will stop the gas flow into my wing. That's why within GUI you will see always only one wing, and it will always be one inflator, because in emergency I have only 100%. It's that it's self-inflating and not like 50-50, and I need to choose and having a little time to evaluate really properly. The other thing as well is that if you do have this runaway inflator, so it inflates all the time, if you combine it with a huge volume of those bungee wings most of the time, because in most of the time the divers will have more volume that they need compressed by those bungees, on the surface and on the way up they will become full. And if you end up on the surface, and if you are unlucky and you end up face down on the surface and you have this big balloon behind you, it will be very hard to have your head up, because it will be just pressing you down on the surface, and then it will be much harder to handle, which is a small detail, but still, if you imagine yourself having a huge amount of gas behind your back pressing you forward, it will not be convenient, because it will just add a little bit more stress into already stressful situation. So what we have been discussing today was bungee wings and non-bungee wings, and then you might imagine that GUI is not really promoting bungee wings, and in fact you cannot do any GUI courses using bungee wings. We always require a non-bungee wing, and we require appropriate volume for the tanks that you will be using, because it's much easier to handle from perspective of stability, weighting, and as well in emergency. And for us, the main disadvantages for bungee wings are that do not provide stability and streamlining that is predictable, because if those bungees break or if those bungees are not even, they will kind of create odd shapes, and the gas might be trapped in a place in a wing that you do not want it to be trapped, and it might be much more harder to release all of the gas. And then we discussed as well how disadvantageous it is as well in regards of waiting and potentially handling an emergency in that wing. And by emergency, I was meaning a wing that cannot hold gas, so a ruptured wing, or a wing that is self-inflating, because the bungees, they will create more challenges for you and more issues by either trapping the gas or by squeezing the gas out, which is a little bit of contrary, but still it will happen that way, and by forcing most of the time the divers to carry more weight than they need, which then, as a consequence, would create those problems in emergency, instability, in controlling the buoyancy, and creating potentially more risk for CO2 retention, being more tired, using more gas because you will carry more weight, you will be less streamlined because of the amount of gas and the amount of weight that you will be carrying. So this video was a little bit less of comparison and pros and cons, because to be honest, from my perspective, I don't see any benefits of using a bungee wing. But maybe there is somebody among you that does have different arguments, and then you might bring them forth in the questions or the comments that we have below, because then I'm always curious about different people's opinions and how they perceive certain things, and if we can explain or if we can learn from each other why one solution is better than the other. I hope that that video helped you a little bit to understand why GUI is not using bungee wings, and then we are not promoting them. We are not using them on the courses in our private diving. I hope that we will have a nice discussion after that video, and I hope to see you in the next one. So have a good day, thank you for watching, and see you next time.